some really good news. Apparently, my sister is coming in town, so I'm really excited about that. Got that news this morning. Me and my sister are like friggin' Bonnie and Clyde. Even when we were kids, like I don't know if everyone has that kind of bond with their sibling. We can literally look at each other and convey a message, and not even like a short message, like a long ass message with details and shit. So really excited. My sister's gonna be in town. Uh, Very excited about that. I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, this is an interesting. I think this is a very interesting topic because it's one of those topics where it's not just black or white people doing it. It's not like, oh, black people are conspiring to oppress mixed people, or white people are conspiring to oppress mixed people, or generally black people. That's they typically go over get us all, but no, it's they join forces like the motherfucking Wonder Twins to take us down, and it's an interesting video. And I think other people have come across it also. I'm a person in their mid 30s, so I wasn't. I don't think I was old enough to even comprehend what was going on. I think this clip is from like the 1980s, so it's an older clip, and it just shows you just how messy television was. It was a very messy time in the 1980s and the early 90s when we were talking about like this talk shows, and they're supposed to be talking about race, and they do it in such a condescending manner. So I'm gonna cue it up. I'm gonna be in the chat. I'm gonna chime in every once in a while. I'm not gonna carpet bomb it with my opinions. I'm gonna try to hold that off into the end. All right. So let's get that going because yeah, this video really grinded my gears. And like I said, some of you may have already come across this video. This may not be new, but this is the first time I've talked about it. So let's get into it. So this gentleman, to my understanding, right here, he is some kind of a biracial. You know what I'm saying? He is not. Um, I don't know if he's first gen biracial. I don't know if he's quadroon, but he is definitely a person that could be white passing, especially in the Northeast. If he told me that he was Italian and we was in Jersey, I'd believe him. I wouldn't ask any more questions. If he told me he was Jewish, I wouldn't ask him any questions. I was like, okay, totally. No questions would be asked. But he is some kind of a mulatto. Don't know where he is on the spectrum, but he's definitely one of those. But he is very black identified in the sense where he wants to be black and only black, which I understand based off of the time period he grew up in, based off of his experience. And I really don't think it's that controversial for mixed people to decide they want to identify as black. It's a lot harder when you are a mixed person and you're trying to identify as white. There are people who have tried to do that, and let's just say they have had a hard time with the legal system. So let's get into this video.
I have been close to who based who my friends were, who based who my girlfriend was, thought that I was disgracing the family and the community that I was in because I was going with the blackest girl in my school.
Your family was angry about that?
Absolutely.
So your family essentially was saying to you, look, you're lucky, look at your skin color, you don't have to worry about everything that afflicts America. Don't blow it now by dating a black-skinned person.
Absolutely.
Linda Medesian, you're multiracial.
Right.
Now, what's the difference?
Right. Well,
And aren't we all?
well,
So this is the point where I have to just tag in. That's such a gaslighting tactic. He's like, aren't we all? And what is that? I've never heard of that. Like, nigga, are you serious? Like, this is about like what, 1989, 88. The word multiracial had existed at least 20 years at that point. But he's gonna sit here and play in her face like he doesn't know what that means. And the funny thing about this is what a lot of white people have done to mixed race people since forever. They pretend like, oh, that's not my kin. I don't know who that person is. That's literally your grandchild. No, I don't know who that is. So Donahue is definitely continuing that legacy. And what you're going to see is he packed the audience with black people. And they're going to have a different reaction. Their reaction is you're trying to separate yourself. You're trying to dismiss. You're trying to put yourself in a higher caste system, right? So this is a setup. This is a setup.
Multiracial is a person with one parent of one race and another parent of another race, or a person with parents who are multiracial themselves. My father is black and American Indian. My mother is Irish. So I'm a blend of three races.
Mm-hmm. And you think that this is important because you want another category of...
Yeah, definitely.
So in other words, on your driver's license, or when, I know it's not legal now to do that. For what purpose?
Look, he's trying to turn the audience against her. He already getting them riled up. See, I see what he's doing. Like, pay attention to what he's doing, how he's masterfully whipping the audience up to get them against her.
For what purpose would a category be deployed?
It would validate the reality that has been in America for at least 350 years.
Which is?
There have been multiracial people, and I include in that definition biracial people, people who are just a blend of two races.
But isn't that, wouldn't that be Rock's circumstance? Isn't he biracial?
I don't know. Are you?
I don't find any significance to developing another race. It's something that's another division.
So he dodged that question. he completely didn't answer that question, and I felt like that was kind of number one, playing in people's face. Number two, it's like you're not really accepting your full identity, because he could have said, well, I have one parent that's white and one parent that's black, or I have two mixed parents, but I'm black, is what he could have said. But he decided to, well, in fairness, I think he checked the temperature of the audience, and he was like, yeah, I'm not trying to get dragged by this audience, so I'm just going to go along with groupthink.
Well, that's an expected opinion, because that opinion has been here for a very long time. And what I'm saying is that there are people, much like myself, who want to be affirmed and accepted for all of who we are, and not ignore, you know, 2/3 of our genetic heritage to please society. I am affirming all of who I am. My black heritage, I'm very proud of my black heritage. I love my father. I feel a bond with black people. I feel a bond with all of who I am, all the people.
I do think this audience, though, might perceive your interest in having another category, namely multiracial, as an effort to distance yourself from blackness.
No, not at all. It's too.
Notice he doesn't identify the fact that she's more European than anything. It's low-key him saying, well, you're still black. Even though you're mostly white, you're still black. I noticed this, and when I see people criticize, you know, black people who attack mixed race people, that's a warranted criticism. But what I don't see is when you see this obvious playing in the faces of mixed people by white people, I don't see a lot of that being called out. And this is a prime example of that. He's still basically trying to say, you need to accept being black. I don't care who your mother is, and I don't care who your grandmother is. You're just black. And I'm going to use this audience to bully you into thinking that. Does this woman look black to you?
To affirm all of who I am.
Okay. Now, do you understand this rumble that we've got here?
I grew up for 28 years having black people, you know, hold me at arm's length, basically, and you know.
You weren't them, and you weren't white, and why? Because you weren't black enough?
Right, I was not black enough. Right.
Well, look who's here. Edward Lawson. Who will forget Mr. Lawson? Let me tell you, in case you've forgotten, and you shouldn't have, here's the...
Now, I actually like him. He's very theatrical. And the fact that he's performing clearly. You're performing, and this is a very serious topic, which leads me to believe that you're not taking this seriously. So, you know, though I like his performances, I don't really consider him a person who's serious. This is all a check for him. Apparently, this used to be his game. He used to go from talk show to talk show, being, this eloquent speaker, but not really doing shit. I don't see any current works that he's a part of. I don't see any nonprofit organizations he was a part of at the time. He just was, I think, some type of an actor. But we're gonna let him talk. And yes, he does look like a zombie. At least I think so. Like, he's definitely giving Walking Dead right
The
now.
California Walkman. No kidding. Here's a guy who would stand on a street corner and get arrested.
Yeah.
And what is not so funny is that it often happened. It happened on public property. He couldn't walk down the street. Some cop had come up. He filed a lawsuit and took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And guess who won? He did. So you're here. How do you feel about what's transpired here? You're listening in on. You're not surprised by the response of this audience to some
No,
of
I
these?
think there are two things that I would say very quickly, Philip.
Proceed, Edward.
I think first, let me take you to our very brief conversation before we went on the show here, as you were very kind to indulge. This is about the third or fourth time I've been on your show. Let me make my first point is that in all the shows that I've ever done, this is the best looking audience I have ever seen. That's what Johnny Carson calls cheap applause. Now let me go into a second point. Let me, without hesitation, pick up the cross which you want someone to bear, and that is the question of light-skinned blacks discriminating against dark-skinned blacks. I have lived...
I'm sorry, I'm distracted. For those of you who know hair, is this a wig? Because this feels like a wig. Because if this is a wig, this makes this more of a performance. Like, he slaps on this, this Bob Marley wig. He goes on these talk shows, and he whips up the crowd. And I don't know. Like, somebody help me out. Maybe I just don't know dreads that well. But this feels fraudulent.
all of my life in some semblance of a black community, and it's a very curious thing to me. I have always heard all of this about light black discrimination, but I simply never believed it. We came from a family where we were all about the same color. It is only in recent years where this...
Why did they have dark-skinned black as his subtitle? I had to stop right there. I'm sorry. Like, the 80s was a very awful time. They let y'all niggas do whatever y'all wanted.
particular subject, which is more buried in the black community than incest, has come to the fore. Yeah. And I think for most of us, being a generous people, being a people who so long wanted to get away from racial questions, there's a desire to sweep this thing under the rug. We don't want to talk about it, but it is here. And the clearest indication you can get of how present this discrimination of light-skinned blacks against dark-skinned blacks, or even worse, dark-skinned blacks against dark-skinned blacks, is to understand the history of where we came from as people. And that history is very rich. Those among us who have light skin, you must understand that we acquired that light skin essentially from a product of slavery. Those of us who live...
Cap. All right, so here's the problem. First of all, we have a woman on the stage who clearly has a white mother. She didn't get her light skin from slavery, okay? Neither did I get my light skin from slavery, okay? That's not something that's the case for every person. That is not the reality of every light-skinned person. We need to stop pushing that fucking myth around, because then you'll just assume that your family has this secret history of rape. Maybe that wasn't the case. All kinds of relationships popped up during Reconstruction and Jim Crow. A lot of secret relationships. Take Vanilla Ice, not Vanilla Ice, Iced Tea, my bad. I forgot, I got those two confused. Ice-T for the longest have said he's Creole. Ice-T has a whole white mother. And I've said this before. White members of his family have him on their family tree. but they don't communicate with him. His mother, when she was a very young woman, she died in her early 20s, left her white family to be with this black soldier. And when she passed on and he passed on, Ice, Ice-T ended up with one of his aunts who was black, and he kind of just called himself Creole because it was easier to identify as a Creole than try to say you have a white mother, especially trying to be in hip-hop at that time in the 1980s. So, like, there's all kinds of reasons why people are light-skinned. Everybody does not descend from some type of situation where one of their ancestors was raped on the plantation. Did that happen to a lot of people? Unfortunately, yes, but that's not the case for all people. And this is a wig, which leads me to believe that this is all a big performance. This is all for a check.
With whiteness in our complexion, we are the living legacy of the fact that Uncle Sam repeatedly raped Mother Africa century after century after century. And therefore,
I'm not sure I understand the consequences of this reality. Does this?
Wait a minute.
And you're dangerously close to
but the point is
to painting self-hate on light-skinned black people.
No, but you see, this is the product. If you look at virtually any so-called black college, do you know where they came from? What happened is a white slave owner would rape a black woman, eventually have a set of conscience pains, and start a school for his light-skinned children. Yes. What would happen if you talked about...
This nigga's lying. That is not true. That is not true. This is before people could whip out their phone and, like, Google and like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound true. That is not the case. What I can say about this audience is you're going to see this a little bit later. There's a generational divide, right? There's no millennials here. We were still fucking in people's wombs or in people's, futures pretty much. We weren't even in the play yet. This is Gen X, this is baby boomers, and this is silent generation folk. And what I can say about the Gen X folks, because it seems like your generation, you guys were the generation that figured out this was the Matrix. Now, some of y'all stayed in the Matrix and some of y'all left. But I would say that was the generation that realized that some of this is some bullshit. And when you notice, when the young people start to speak up about this case, they're going to make better points. And I want you to pay attention to how the older generation reacts to that.
The only black people who were permitted to read or learn to read, they were his light-skinned children. The first people to be freed when he died and left it in his will were his light-skinned children. So when emancipation finally came about, those among us who were light-skinned had already been integrated into American society. And the rest of us who were darker were slaves, and we have remained in the white American mind and in our own mind that distant slave even to this day.
W. Curtis Banks joins us. You are a psychologist on sabbatical leave from Harvard. You've recently done some research on the very thing about which we speak, so kindly bring an academic perspective to this. I'll give you a blank check here. What would you like to share with us here at the outset?
Well, the first thing I'd like to share is that I'm on sabbatical leave from Howard University.
I beg your pardon. You have my apology.
The second thing is that I want to go back to the dilemma that you posed between yourself and the audience. Why is it that you raised the question about complexion discrimination? And you have a denial from the audience that there is a clear preference for light skin.
True, we did.
The reason for that is that the audience is right, first of all. There is not, and apparently has not been, a preference for light skin complexion in the black community, any more than there has been ever a preference for white complexion in the black community.
Who wants in there?
So I think he's talking about generally speaking. Like, there's a difference between seeing the light-skinned mixed child and saying, oh, that's a cute kid, and you see a bunch of dark-skinned kids, and the only one you pay attention to is the light-skinned child. I see that happen a lot. But generally, do all black people want to be mixed or light-skinned? No, because if they were, they would find white partners or, partners who are closer to European, and there would be far more mixed people. Most black people want to see themselves in their children. They want to see a variation of themselves. So I agree with the doctor. For the most part, black people want to see other black people. There are people who date interracially, You will be confused if you think social media speaks for all black people. No, they're still pretty monoracially black in the South for the most part. Like, look at the demographics or travel. Like, it's still pretty black in the South. Most black people enjoy being black. So when I would hear other content creators try to throw around, oh, you're hating on me, you want to be mixed, I'm like, you must not know black people for the most part, because they don't. For the most part, they like being black. They don't like being oppressed. They would prefer to have some of the wealth that white people have accumulated over the last 300 years. But no, they don't want to wake up and be white. Nor do they want their children to be white. I agree with the doctor. I mean, he said no lies, but watch how the audience come after for him.
What do you, yeah, yes.
What I like to say is that has not been my experience in this world. My experience from even black brothers is light skin, hey, light skin. I mean, they prefer light-skinned women. I've even seen sisters wearing 3 shades lighter foundation because they're not happy with their blackness.
So Gen X, she spoke up, and this is not inaccurate. There are certain people who do that, but that's not the majority of people doing that. You can look at the audience and see the majority of people are not trying to look anything outside of themselves. You don't see a bunch of, dark-skinned black people with blonde weave in their hair or, light foundation or anything that appears to be white passing or trying to pass themselves off as anything that they're not. Are you going to come across a little bit of that in the hood or in certain spaces? Sure. You're going to come across a couple of weirdos. But for the most part, people like being who they are. And thank God for that shit.
There is discrimination.
Yes, sir.
I am one of the women up there's clothing designer, and I have been on several experiences with her where people will say, oh, she's so ugly, and they say that because she's dark. And she possesses all the inherent features of what, yes, what people consider beautiful. Full lips, high cheekbones, almond eyes. She's a beautiful woman, but people react to her that, oh, she's ugly because she's dark.
Yeah.
Imagine your friend called you out. First of all, she is very beautiful. Like, we're not even going to play that. I'm not feeling the 80s hair, but, like, she's clearly beautiful. But imagine your friend call you out like that. Oh, you would not be my fucking friend.
Yeah.
I believe because of the experience in the 60s that there was a breaking down of this difference between light skins and black skins, and that anybody who still maintains that type of thought today
but that
needs some teaching.
Yes, they do, but that type of thought doesn't just go away. I think Ebony, I give Ebony credit for telling us about her grandmother, and my own limited experience tells me that that was common.
I can understand how people feel about those things, and they're valid for each person's experience.
Yeah.
But I just don't consider it to be a valid issue in and of itself. It's fundamentally wrong.
Yes, ma'am. You want? Yes, ma'am.
I think that it may be a fact, but we are all black in here, light and dark, and we need to stick together and forget about what color we are, because politically and everything, we are lacking. We are not together politically. We need to get together and forget about what color we are.
Yeah, but we're not going to fix it.
That's the problem. The whole trying to get everybody to join forces politically, because everyone doesn't have the same political, alignment. Some people are conservative, some people are progressive, some people fall in between. So I think instead of trying to force everyone in a political box, we should respect everyone's political opinion. And where we all agree, then hell, we can work together and collaborate. And the points where we don't agree, we can just, work with those who we do agree with. It's not an issue where we have to separate or, you stay on your side of the fence kind of a situation. But politically, it's harder to mix people together. It's a much harder sell.
If you're going to say that you can't fix, white people can't fix racism if they don't acknowledge they have it.
We live in a looks-less society. Men, period, don't like fat women. That's a whole other issue. It's a looks-less society. You can't get rid of it. You cannot get rid of it. How many men in here date a woman that weighs 300 pounds? You won't.
Well,
so what? It's a preference. So then you have some men that prefer...
Yeah, some men what?
Then you have some men that prefer a light-skinned woman over a black woman because they feel that they are so beautiful and they're so close to white that they can have beautiful like kids with the long hair.
Yes. But see, but this kind of testimony, now hold on a minute. This kind of testimony has to do with gender. The sisters believe this, and the males are saying, nah, it doesn't exist.
Yep, he has effectively whipped up that audience, and this is what I don't like about the black community. We let folk whip us up, and we'll be fighting each other, and they'll just sit back and watch. I've watched it happen on YouTube, where, you know, older people from other races will come inside of black or black adjacent spaces, get everybody whipped up and watch them fight. And that's what's going on here.
That's not what I'm saying.
Because I had a friend, and he asked me, I told him, I said, I have a girlfriend I want you to meet. He said, well, is she light skin or brown skin? I said, does it matter? He said, well, I don't date light-skinned women because they think they got their butt on their shoulders. They think they're too cute. Okay?
I would just like to bring back the point that I do know of a small southern college that to be admitted, you have to send in a photograph with your application. And if you're light-skinned, you was accepted. If you're dark-skinned, you was rejected.
Listen,
that's a fact.
There are clubs now.
Pause. There is no, you don't get any brownie points. There's nothing brave about calling out a college but not calling out a specific college. I mean, say their name or keep it on a playground, because honestly, you didn't really do anything here. You made an incendiary allegation and you didn't put anybody's name on it. So you should have never raised your hand, sir.
Or have been private clubs that determined whether or not you got in was determined by how you matched a paper bag. You probably know this. Now let me just show you Frank's Place. Frank's Place, the TV show. Watch this. The guy wants to go to a club and she's calling him on it.
Pause. Doesn't Donahue look like an adult version of Dennis the Menace? I just realized that, like, he looks like a grown-ass Dennis the Menace.
See this bag?
Yeah.
Which is darker, me or the bag?
You.
Which is darker, you or the bag?
What are you talking about?
The capital C Club? In the old days, Frank, if you were a light-skinned black, you were a Creole. They spell Creole with a capital C. If you were dark-skinned, it was Creole with a little c. And there was a big difference between the two.
Skin color used to be the big separator in New Orleans, Frank.
Still is. They just ain't as out in the open about it.
I'm really impressed. This is interesting.
Here's something I want people to stop doing. I want people to stop assuming that all black American culture is the same. Because what happened in New Orleans is not the same thing that happens in New York, Ohio, Idaho, Oakland, California. These are not, these are very different cultures and different types of black people. Yeah, New Orleans was a very unique city. And it wasn't even all of Louisiana. It's specifically New Orleans. So that wasn't the vibe everywhere.
I see the women with a different perspective than the men.
Okay, when I was at Howard, okay, the first thing that I did, because there were so many beautiful brown-skinned women there, I went out and got Max Factor tan number 2.
To be dark. To be dark.
Put it all over my face until one day a fellow picked me up for a football game, and he looked at me and he said, what is that peanut butter mess all over your face, girl?
Okay, I would just like to say that it's imitation. Black people imitating white people. In 1890, my great-grandfather was born. In 1898, my great-grandmother was born. They were dark-skinned, but they were prejudiced against dark-skinned. And they put me on a pedestal, their little great-granddaughter. And my sister, who was dark-skinned, they made her feel very bad.
Now,
and they were imitating.
has this influenced you? Apparently not.
Well, you know how it influenced me? When I was little, I knew it was wrong. When I was 4 years old, 3.5, 4 years old, and I said, Mama, why are you doing this to Marie? And she said to me, if you want to be treated the same, you better keep your big mouth shut, okay? So I quieted up. But anybody that bothered my sister in school, I beat them up. Okay, if they told her that she was dark and she was ugly or what have you, I beat them up. I fought for her. I wouldn't fight for myself. I was chicken. But for my sister, I would fight.
I believe you, and I don't ever want you mad at me. Listen, here's what is not so funny. You obviously had a sense of, you can't do that to my sister, this is my sister, that's great. But how about those young women who were raised, doesn't depend on sex, any males as well, who were raised, who didn't have the discriminated sister, were suddenly celebrating their lightness. You grow up with your own problem about fellow black people. Okay. That's the agony and the legacy that's left by grandmothers. God bless them. I'm sure they had, you know, okay.
Some good intentions. You know but I know a light-skinned sister who was on a pedestal.
I'm sorry, but I had to interject. It's not just grandma's fault. Yes, grandma's a colorist, and she was a hot mess, or great-grandma, whoever it was. But it was the system of white supremacy during the 1900s, early 1900s, that helped develop that colorist attitude. So, no, it doesn't begin with grandma. Grandma was a fucking side effect of the system that already existed. But, you know, Donahue never points that out.
Pedestal today, okay, because her mother put her on a pedestal. Mother was dark, the father was light, so they had this light-skinned little girl.
Tell me about
so the mother would always say, oh, you light-skinned, you so pretty. And then when she had a daughter, the daughter was light-skinned. And then the grandmother had a foster child that was dark-skinned. She would peg the granddaughter against a little chocolate little boy, okay? And this daughter of hers, light-skinned, sat up there and allowed her mother to do this.
So and arrogance is bred.
Okay, so some people do not realize what's right and what's wrong. Some people don't realize what's correct and incorrect.
Point. But determining what's correct and incorrect has a lot to do about the influence of your childhood. And if your family is celebrating lightness,
let me tell you something. You know what's right and you know what's wrong. I don't care who you are. If you have any amount of intelligence, we're all born with that. And my mother, great-grandmother, was wrong, okay? She was wrong. And I love her. She taught me so much. But she was wrong.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Skin's unbalanced.
I'm glad you waited, caller. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm half white and half black. I haven't even been wanted by my own family.
You haven't even been what?
Wanted by my own family. I'm not allowed in my brother's house. And what do you do? In school,
I do appreciate that a lot of these mixed race people are from the Northeast. Like, I feel like mixed race people of the South have a very different experience. And a lot of times when I see a lot of anti-blackness, I feel like it's a reflection of that history of racism that's in the South. So it's interesting to hear people from up north of the Mason-Dixon still experience similar things, and they're able to talk about it and talk about it outwardly. Even the young lady who talked about her colorist great-grandmother, like, they're able to talk about these things and identify that it's wrong and not still play this game of, well, you know, it's on both sides. No, it comes from a history of racism and white supremacy. And they're able to identify how wrong it is.
the blacks didn't want me because I was too light. I couldn't be black, and the whites didn't want me because I was too dark.
Well,
how do you fight this your whole life? My father didn't want me, yet his mother was black.
Yeah.
My mother was the only one that protected me.
Yeah, Linda, commenting.
What's your name?
Well, shit, don't do that.
My name is Jen.
I can relate a lot to her because I grew up in a black neighborhood. The blacks didn't accept me. I grew up in a white home environment. My mother was white, my grandparents were white, and my father was not home. So I realized it very early that I was different. I was treated as white by the blacks, and I knew I wasn't white when I compared myself with my mother.
And you were treated as black by the whites?
Right.
All right.
when I finally became in my 20s, I resolved it. And I resolved it by affirming all of who I am. And I think that's the resolution. You cannot say, I am black only, and ignore the rest of your lineages. Because that, you know what's that saying? That saying.
Pause. This woman has done a lot of personal work. Outside of just race and identity, you can tell she's done a lot of personal work. Maybe got some therapy, read some books, really worked on herself. Because number one, she's not getting defensive. She sees that the audience is against her. But she can stay firm on her square, and she knows she's right, but she doesn't have to argue these people down with it, because this is about her experience. Like, this is what you want to be. You have to be clear with who you are and realize that the whole world isn't going to accept you. There's going to be people who's going to say, you're just black. You need to just accept it. Or you're going to also have some people call you white, especially when black people get upset. I've noticed that. If they get pissed off at you, they will, use a mixed person as their white punching bag. And everything that they hate about white people, they're going to filter that into you. It's going to be your fault somehow. But this woman has done a lot of work on herself, and I encourage people to do that.
Say one drop of black blood and you're black. And let me say,
go ahead, please make your point.
That logic was started by the white slave masters to oppress as many blacks as they could.
Now what logic?
The logic that one drop of black blood makes you black. And that same logic is used today in South Africa to oppress as many people as possible. And I am not going to deny my mother and her relatives and my American Indian relatives.
But that's because you're a very healthy, centered woman. Not this woman with whom we spoke a moment ago on the phone. I think your advice to her is she has got to put this together all by her.
To accept all of who she is, affirm all of who she is.
And stop
let anybody tell her who she can and cannot identify with.
Over here, please.
Well, me growing up, my sister was dark-skinned. I'm from, my parents are from Barbados, West Indies. My grandmother is dark-skinned, and we were brought up to respect each other. We have enough problems dealing with the white America. That's right. All right, we have enough problems to deal with that. So we have to, fight amongst ourselves. We can't do it. Light skin, brown skin, black, pink, you gotta take care of yourself, and you gotta take, and deal with the problems that is presented to you.
Let me make you'll get it. Phil, I promise you'll get it. Just give me, I got wisdom on it.
Phil, I like to first say that there's a lot of light-skinned women in here, a lot of dark-skinned women in here, and they're all beautiful because black is beautiful.
Okay.
But what I'd like to ask is to the two lighter-skinned people up on the stage, were they, like in their family, were they prejudiced against, were they the only light-skinned people in their family, everybody else dark? Or
no, my whole family was like light-skinned. And one of the things that I have never experienced in my life was discrimination from other blacks. For whatever the reason, I was accepted.
You were lucky.
I was accepted. And Phil, I like to make a point, though, that the gentleman up there made. I like to just give a quick example. One time when my cap wouldn't fit me and I couldn't play my baseball game, I took off from school at lunch and went and got a haircut at a white barber shop. It's the first time I'd ever done that. My uncle had generally cut my hair. When he found out what my name was and that I was black, he said, he put the razor to my throat that he was shaving the back of my head with and said, nigga, don't ever come in here again. I make that point for this reason.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 12, 13 years old.
Whoa.
I'm as light-skinned, I guess, as you can possibly get. And those people... those people...
I'm not sure of that, Rock, but go ahead.
Well, the point is that those people...
See, Donahue is real passive-aggressive towards the mixed people on the stage. I've noticed that. Like, he is, like, the most, like, passive-aggressive host I've ever come across. Is this just how he was? You got to bear in mind, like, I was a zygote when this shit happened. So I wasn't around for his time period. Now, I was around for, what was it, Sally, Jesse, Raphael. I think that was one of them. Ricky Lake. You know what? Ricky Lake should come back and do podcasts. I could fuck with Ricky Lake again. I was around, of course, for Jerry Springer and, all of those other later shows. Was he always like this? Was he, like, always a kind of an asshole? Or is he doing something very specific to this group?
And those institutions that choose to oppress us look at us, no matter what our hue, as just another nigga.
Yes. Linda, please.
Reality. If you have a white mother and a black father, and you're calling yourself black, you are ignoring half of your heritage. You are ignoring it. Let me say, why is it logical to have a black...
I have to agree with a lot of what people are saying in here. I think that black Americans have a lot more to deal with than who's lighter than who. This is my best friend here, okay? And she's as light as anybody else up there, but do you think we have time to sit around and talk about who's lighter than who?
You don't say...
But wait a minute, let me finish making, my point is this, a lot of it has to deal with a legacy of white supremacy that black people in this country have to deal with, as well in South Africa. When you get into color, okay, you can go all over the globe. Black people are spread to the corners of the world. We cannot afford to start separating ourselves like black, Indian. Right.
But you can't fix this if you don't acknowledge it's here.
Notice, I think her name was Lisa. I probably have it incorrect. It's rather early for me, but I don't think she said anything about separating. She's never used the word separate. All she said was identify and embrace.
The point.
We're acknowledging that it's here. We are acknowledging that it's here, but we're saying let's move on and deal with it.
Ideally, this is all fine, but the fact is, if you want to really look at what the situation is like, you have to look at the children, okay? Because children will say things that adults want. We learn to mask things and not say certain things. My mother is a teacher in an inner city school where there's constant joking among the children between, oh, you ugly black thing, you ugly. The children who are light-skinned, the Puerto Rican kids, they treat the black kids like dirt. I have cousins who are mulattoes, okay? That's the old term that they use for interracial children of interracial marriages. And those children, when they were here with me in New York, all the kids thought they...
See how controversial that word is? Like, certain people, you say that M word, it's, oh my God, don't you ever call me a mulatto. In my opinion, mulatto is a far nicer word than hard R, but I guess you can't tell a person how to feel about a word. So, it's a controversial word.
Were the best thing on the block because their mother was white.
You know what
and they all
means?
wanted to, and that's the media. It's the media. The media is doing this because the media has the best image of what it is to be beautiful, and it's European features. The media brings up the image of what's beautiful, and black children are some great consumers of the media, and they are the ones who are really becoming the victims of it. So it's fine for us to ignore it, but the fact is it's there and it starts from childhood.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
I can't.
Are you there, caller? Go ahead.
Yes, Phil. I am a college student. I am dark-skinned. I am black. I am from the Midwest. It is very prevalent that blacks discriminate against other blacks. I'm very similar to the very first woman on your panel. I grew up in an all-white neighborhood, went to an all-white private Catholic high school, all girls. I didn't encounter this until I came to this university. It's a big 8 school. I came here wanting to pledge a sorority. They told me, oh, no, you will never do. There's never been a dark-skinned girl to pledge this sorority. You will never do. I've been here for 4 years.
You know about this?
I have left that sorority alone.
Hang on a minute.
What she's saying about sorority Phil's one day was true, that the sorority I'm in, if I was dark-skinned, I wouldn't have been able to pledge 60 years ago. But that's all changed.
Now, she says no. Now, wait a minute. You want to know?
And people need to stop believing that just because your school allowed you to pledge does not mean that the school and wherever is going to do the same for their black students. It's not the same at every school. Like, you're supposed to follow rules, but they don't always. Like, for example, hazing. You're not supposed to do hazing anymore. They still haze. They have different ways of hazing now. Like, I think a kid recently died from drinking too much water. They make them eat a bunch of hot Cheetos, a bunch of hot Takis and shit, and do a bunch of shots. So they're not beating you up or making you strip or making you have a sex with a whole bunch of people like they did back in the bad old days, but they're still hazing. And they can still find ways to eliminate black students who are trying to pledge. For example, I had a family member who was trying to pledge at a fraternity that was primarily a white fraternity, and he got washed out because they expected him to do everyone's work. How can you do everyone's work and your own work? And then, of course, do whatever dumb shit you have to do as a pledge. So they find little ways to wash out the black pledges without doing it the old-fashioned way. So don't assume that these schools are not still doing discriminatory practices. They get sued all the fucking time for that.
What's the matter?
Believe me.
What's the matter?
That's not true. I have a daughter who's dark-skinned who went to Cornell University. The black sorority up there rejected her. Not only the sorority, but the black men. They dated white women or very fair black women. My two daughters to this day are hurting. Now, it's true that my daughter pledged the white sorority because they wanted her. And she's very dark girl. Now, we join together as a group when we have a common problem, and when you go on these marches, blacks of all hues are there. When the group as a whole is threatened, we're there like a family. But we can't deny that this exists in our group.
Just 1 second. Hang on 1 second. Would you mind, now you don't have to, if this would jeopardize you in any way, what's the school?
I go to KU, Kansas University, Danny Manning. Trying to win the Big A.
See, she put a name on it. That's why she gets respect. She put a name on it. Don't tell me about some alleged school that did some alleged, discriminatory practices. Put a name on it.
Kansas as in Lawrenceville.
Right. Lawrence, Kansas. I'm from St. Louis.
I mean Lawrence.
Lawrence, Kansas. I'm from St. Louis.
What's the
The sorority?
Yeah.
Alpha Kappa Alpha X.
I'm light, I'm dark, and they got a lot more K's in here, I bet. We are mixed. The bacillus is dark.
Hang on. Yeah.
I wanted to answer the latest question about her daughters with black men only dating light women. My brothers are very fair with green eyes, and they have two black, beautiful wives. It's an individual thing. I also am quite fortunate. I have one dark child and one light, and I love them equally.
I like to say that in my family I have sisters and brothers who are very light, who are very dark, but my family did not discriminate against any of us. They treat us all the same. And in Leslie Parks, I've been knowing her since 1972. She treats the black-skinned person as well as she treats the light-skinned person.
Yes, sir.
It's only natural that you're going to have some discrimination in terms of light and dark skin because the media is programming us that the lighter you are, that's the better. The darker you are. That's, for instance, you want to sell cosmetics? White people put on blush. That means, in that case, dark is better. Generally, if you're black and they want to get to your market, they're going to create things so you can become light-skinned. Hair straightener. There's nothing to sell you unless they sell you that lie.
Yeah, it's really... While your pals are buying the light base, or whatever it is you do, all the white folks are laying in the sun trying to get black.
It is the media.
What?
It is the media because most models, black models on a cover of Ebony or whatever, you see them have light skin, light brown eyes. Yeah, you see that.
I could be wrong, but the generation that I grew up in, I will say that I saw dark skin and light skin and every tone in between when it came down to black actors, actresses, models, performers. I never saw a surplus of light skin really until like the early 2000s and to maybe like the early 2010s. There was just this surplus of just racially ambiguous talent. But in my formative years when I was growing up and shit, I saw everybody. There was just as many dark skinned celebrities as there were light skinned and every other tone in between. There was a lot of representation on all sides. If you were a person growing up and you wanted to find someone who had phenotypes similar to yours and you were a black person or a mixed person or whatever, you could find somebody that you can look up to. I don't know about the 80s. Maybe it was different then. But in the 90s, early 2000s, that was my experience.
Yes, ma'am.
My parents are naturalized citizens.
Yes, ma'am.
And where they come from, we would be considered octoroons because they had each had one white and one black parent. Now, I go to visit my sister in Los Angeles, and she was working in a department store. I go in, and I ask for her, and the lady says she's out to lunch. And I said, well, tell her sister was here from New York. So when she came back from lunch, she said, oh, somebody came in playing a joke on you. So she says, what do you mean? She says, oh, there was a woman that came in and said that she was your sister from New York, a black woman. She said, oh, that's my sister. She's here visiting. She says, well, Miss Youngblood, you never told me that you were black. She says, I've known you for 7 years. She says, you never asked me.
Ebony, yes.
I want to get back to that sorority situation, and you don't have to go back 60 years to define that prejudice. That's the only, in preparing for this show, that's the most prominent memory that I had, was arguing with my parents about what college I was going to go to, and I utterly refused to go to a black college so that I would not be prejudiced against. I did not want to get into that game playing of the sororities and being pledged into sorority. I just didn't feel like having my heart broken that way.
Phil, I'll give you all a chance. You're entitled to it. Ed, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to see how manageable you've become over the past several years. I admire your passion, and we'll give you a chance to vent it here. I'll give you a chance in just a moment.
Sara Lee has a bagel for people who like lots of raisins, for people who like lots of poppy seeds, and for people who don't like anything at all.
Nobody doesn't like Sara Lee. Both of these stop the symptoms of a cold. But 12-hour contact works twice as long as Actifed tablets. So if you're sneezing, congested, or have a runny nose, which would you rather take? Until there's a cure, there's contact.
Don't use plain petroleum jelly, but my lips are really dry and cracked. Use Blistex ointment. I found it's better. Isn't Blistex for cold sores?
All that salt, no life in it.
You mean you actually heard him?
Sure, I heard him. He was right there in the den.
It's a heavenly experience as George Burns stars Sunday night after late Olympic coverage.
Oh, I'm so glad I was born in the future.
Personal opinion, Phil. Yeah. I don't believe that this particular problem of discrimination categorically exists throughout the entire race. It was alluded to earlier that there is ignorance. There's ignorance that...
I hear you, but peep the hairline. Peep how, like, it's... Not only is it a different kind of pattern under, it's not connected to any kind of dread. It looks like it was haphazardly thrown on top of his head, and he was pushed onto the stage. And, you know, this was back in the day where people couldn't tell the difference, or they didn't have the hair technology that we have now. Now we can look at your shit and be like, wait a minute. This is foolery. And honestly, he don't need the fucking dreads to be more qualified, in my opinion. But back in the day, you know, put on some dreads, you know, get you a African, you know, medallion, and all of a sudden you're considered qualified to talk about black issues. So that's the impression I'm getting. I'm getting the vibe that is just peep the hairline. I want you to peep that hairline.
That's true. But again, I don't think that it categorically exists. Also, my fraternity has a lot of light-skinned brothers in it. The Q-dogs. Yeah. All right? That's right. Woof, woof. And we allow all the brothers to express themselves.
Yes. Went to Howard University, Omega Psi Phi, okay, had a group of light-skinned women, and they had a beauty contest. And it was only for light-skinned women.
Thank you.
Okay? All right, now I'm going to tell you.
I would just like to say,
dark-skinned brothers.
okay, I would just like to say that a lot of what we're saying in here is true, okay? We're going back and forth, white, black, whatever, okay? The bottom line is we got to work together, okay? We should be talking about how we're going to fix the problem and not that whether or not it exists or not.
Please.
I agree that there is discrimination between the light skin and dark skin. But what I am saying is that it's separatism that has been created by our society.
We shouldn't be surprised that somebody would co-opt the so-called values of the mainstream culture. That's not a surprise.
Let me make this point. I think that the two things. One is this particular audience is particularly enlightened, so there may not be this degree of racism. But let me take
P, the hairline. Notice it's not only a different pattern, it's a different color.
the point that this gentleman made before in terms of ebony. The question is not what our individual stories are. Some of us are light, some of us are dark, some of us have been hurt, some of us have hurt. The question is, what is the average as you go into black America? Let me offer ebony as an example. I remember one of my first experiences with light skin, dark skin was as a little Negro looking at Ebony magazine and wondering why is a so-called black magazine have white women on the cover, white women in all of the advertisements, white women in any of the models. Go out of this room right now. Go downstairs to any magazine rack that you want to. Pick up a copy of Ebony and you will see white women. You will see white women who have a smidgen of black in them for anyone who is a model. Go to Time, go to Newsweek, go to anyone who is an advertiser. And if they're doing multi-racial advertising, if there's a black model, it's a light-skinned model. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say it's very upsetting in this day and time, 1988, that we're sitting here discussing what might be called the lighter shade of pale.
But please don't.
The problem's not going to
I don't expect the problem. I don't expect the problem to go away, and I know that there is a problem, but I feel that a part of the problem is that the lighter-skinned people of our society also tries to form their own society, which does not help us to get together as a people. I said some.
Why can't she say that without making you angry? Yes. Please.
I think a lot of it is society that's...
Pause. He's acting all shocked. Like, why is everyone so upset? Why can't people, make their opinion? You've whipped up the audience. It's quite obvious why people are upset. You're talking about a very sensitive topic. You whipped everyone up, and now everyone's pissed off, and no one's really listening to each other. Like, nobody's listening. That was the whole point. You wanted to create a circus for TV.
Separating us. Society is telling us that we are different, so we are different. Look at black videos. The only person in the video is black is the musician. I mean, that's how it is.
Yes, ma'am. You'll stand, please?
Yes, there are several issues I'd like to discuss.
You can't do that.
Okay.
All right.
Well, first of all, in terms of black, when you talk about black, you're talking about a political idea. Yes. The idea is that as black people, intellectually, you understand it. You said it was negative. White people said it was a negative concept. We as blacks, we come over any rainbow of hue, any hue you have. No one comes like us. Not only that, Dr. Banks was saying that we do not have that schism that you're saying. If we did, like it was said last night by a friend of mine, why, if they separated light against dark, why do we have so many brown people here? We all miscegenate. That's not something. Plus, I want to ask you, something that is prevalent among the Caucasians also. Why does everyone want to be a blonde? Why do white children tell you, or adults tell you, when I was young I was blonde? No, you are whatever you are, and however you advanced, as you aged, you got darker. Yes. So look at it from a really intellectual point of view as opposed to an emotional.
I'm trying to. Yes.
Sir, the point is...
Though I don't necessarily agree with all of her points, her final point about having an intellectual argument versus an emotional argument is spot on. Because you're not going to get anywhere where everyone's pissed off, no one's really listening to each other, everyone's just reacting, and that's what he wanted. He wanted everyone to just react and get mad and pissed off. In fact, he's going to the people he know are the most pissed off in the audience and hoping they say something to piss somebody else off, and then they'll respond, and he'll just keep playing this game of tennis. They were playing in y'all faces back in the 80s.
It is not that there is no schism.
Please listen.
The point is not that there is no schism. In our research at Howard, the very first thing we found is that there are at least 140 different individual distinctions that black people make as a function of complexion. So there's no question that distinctions and discriminations are there. the point I was making initially is that that schism, if and when it exists, does not simply run along the line of light-dark. What the research shows consistently is that black people prefer brown. They do not prefer light, they do not prefer dark, they prefer brown. That is not to say that they don't have some preference, but it is not at either extreme.
Are you there, caller? Let me get this caller on here. Go ahead.
Hello? Okay.
And that research still holds up today. Mind you, he's talking about older research. They have updated that research and it's still the same. They don't really prefer dark. They don't prefer light. Black people prefer brown. Now, what constitutes as brown? It varies from person to person, it looks like. But there isn't a desire to have their kids look like Drake. But there's also not a desire to have their kids look like, who's a really dark-skinned person? Lupita Nyong'o, for example. They may want her phenotypes where, you know, the shape of her face and, of course, her beauty, but they don't necessarily want the hue of her skin, nor the hue of the skin of Drake.
The point I'm trying to make, I'm a white man, and I'm married to a young lady of color, and we have a 5-year-old son. And what we encounter every day of our life is people of color resent us, and they hate us. If my wife walks down the street alone, they'll accept her. But let her walk down the street with me and my son, my wife and my son, and we get all kinds of looks, and people come out and say things. So we find that the majority of black people don't accept the fact of interracial marriages. They don't like that.
People can say what they want, so we are trying to deny the fact that we do have prejudice among ourselves. We do. Look at yourself when you get married. Most couples are attracted to the opposite complexion. My husband is dark. My 2 children are in between. Most of the time, that is true. You deny it, it's true.
You agree? I agree. He agrees. That's a true fact. That's a true fact. You don't agree. Hang on a minute. Well, hang on a minute. Yeah.
I agree that
Hang on a minute.
there is a problem in the black community, and if you do not acknowledge the problem, you will never be able to solve it.
I agree
Never.
with that. I agree with that. But, you know, you're reacting, we shouldn't be surprised, exactly as an audience of white people reacts on more than one occasion.
The problem has not been faced and has not been acknowledged because here again, look at the NAACP. Look at the leadership in the Urban League. If you go back to their history at the beginning, you look at one light-skinned Negro after another light-skinned Negro after another light-skinned Negro. They have not brought the subject up because it is embarrassing for them. They are basically predisposed to keep themselves in purgatory at the expense of keeping dark-skinned people in hell.
Thank you. You know, I think that we've missed...
Please let this young woman make her point. Yes, ma'am.
I think that we've missed the whole issue here. I think it's the white people that have the problem because they are in control of the media. Wait a minute. They are in control of the media. And that's what we see, and that's what most of us believe. And another point is that it's a problem in the white community. Blondes are beautiful. Why do you see so many blondes on television? Because that's their standard. And most of us believe the same kind. We've been taught to believe. Not saying that it's right. We've been taught to believe that.
I think that's true. I've got a break. We'll be back. I'll give you a chance in just a moment. Is there a value system, however warped it might be, that is very close to racism that expresses itself within communities of people of color based upon the shade of that color? That's the issue. And when I first presented this question to this audience, I felt the negative energy. But you were responding not unlike any people of any color would. No, I'm not racist.
You know,
I'm not prejudiced.
That
I'm
continues
not
to happen, Phil, and it will continue to happen. We really made a mistake here to let you allow this to be a black and a light-skinned sort of thing.
But
And
that's
not
the purpose of the program.
And not bring up Africa, our culture. Not to bring up Africa. We are African Americans.
Make your point.
Sir, a monoracial black American is many generations from Africa, okay? And culturally speaking, whether black people want to admit it or not, they are more like white people, culturally speaking, than their Cameroonian and Nigerian ancestors are today. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not relevant. It's definitely a relevant thing, but For a person who is one of the most white presenting people on that stage, it's interesting how he deflects to, well, let's talk about Africa. I mean, we can, but I don't know if that's really going to solve any of the problems or really focus this conversation right now. I feel like he's deflecting. He did a lot during this panel.
I just like to point out to my brothers and sisters that we're not expected to be the same, all of us. Look at your... No, it's not a speech.
I know that we agree with you.
It isn't a speech. Sure, we have problems, you understand?
Yeah.
But we are here together as a unit, and we're very cohesive,
right.
as we are in life. This is just a micronism of how we really are. We have our differences. Sure we do.
Yes, but sometimes those differences express themselves in very unbecoming ways.
Yes,
That's
but
what
our
we're talking
differences is what's going to make us strong.
Yes, sir.
Well, basic point I wanted to make is this, though. People, if it weren't color, it would be speech. When I grew up, kids used to make fun of me because of the way I spoke. I mean, look at England and Ireland. I mean, people just fight for the sake of fighting. If it weren't color, it would be something else. I mean, the question I have is, like, where do we go from here? We know this is a problem.
What do you think?
Well, I think we've addressed it as a problem. We've aired the dirty laundry. Like, what's next?
It starts with discrimination in the home with your light-skinned children and your dark-skinned children. You've got to stop this crap. You've got to teach these children to have self-esteem no matter what they look like.
Exactly. We have to define ourselves. Yeah, that issue, I think, is defining ourselves. And when you see this happening in the classrooms, you realize...
Yeah, that was mostly the show. I think that there was like a final thought or some bullshit in the end. We're not sitting around for that. So you saw it. Like, I've interjected enough for you guys to know where I stand on the matter. I saw a messy white man get a whole bunch of black people pissed off in the audience, so they would react emotionally to mixed race people talking about either research or their own personal experiences. At no point did any of the mixed race people say anything about separating or thinking they're better than, but you could tell that the host was trying to, in many different ways, imply that and get the audience all pissed off. So anytime they would react to the panelists, it was always a hostile interaction. I mean, these conversations aren't new, as you can tell, because you can still hear these very same conversations online, and they go nowhere. Just like that conversation went nowhere. That's why I'm very selective on where I go. I don't go to everyone's panel. I don't go to everyone's channel. I don't prefer these kind of food fights about race because they go nowhere. Nowhere. Waste of time. So what's the point of all of this? Well, the next time you go to a panel and you see some bullshit like this go down, realize that this isn't a new element. And these people aren't really interested in moving the conversation forward, much like Donahue wasn't interested in moving the conversation forward. These niggas is out here for a check, or today, a click and a view. Because they're not really getting paid for this kind of content. They're just doing it for attention. If you really are serious about these conversations, when it comes down to mixed race experiences, you need to go to groups in person. You have to actually, and there's groups that exist already, sometimes locally, sometimes these are national groups. Hell, there's even Facebook groups that you can join, and you can really talk about these issues in a respectful, mature fashion. Or you can go to a panel and act like an asshole. The decision is yours. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. It was nice chatting with you guys.